Module 6, Climate Change. Now, climate change is an issue that's facing extreme amount of debate, even though the amount of evidence strongly supports its existence. Before we go directly into that, just a few important definitions. What we mean by climate being conditions of the atmosphere over a long period of time. It's basically looking at least 30 years as a standard averaging period, whereas weather are conditions over a short period of time. So climate is a long-term frame, and so when people keep talking about the effects of, oh, it's snowing, so there can't be global warming, that's not what people are focusing on. People are focusing on the climate, which is a much longer period of time. In looking at the evidence for climate change, people are focused on the changes that are happening in the modern era. For the most part, in terms of recorded history, in terms of fluctuations of this planet's surface temperature, the range hasn't been all that great until the time of industrialization and the greater use of fossil fuels and the burning of fossil fuels, and have been seeing a great increase in the warming of the planet, and that increase has been increasing dramatically within the past 20 years or so, 20, 30 years, with projections showing a great increase into the century. So these are the issues that people are stating the need, and the impact of this climate change will have a great effect on the health and well-being of the planet and everyone on it. So the level of evidence, okay, we have the rising temperatures. People have also been identifying changes in rainfall patterns, increase in drought in many areas, increase in frequency of heat waves and extreme climatic events, the melting of ice and frozen ground, the rising of sea levels, the loss of land and marine biodiversity as fresh water is melting and going into the sea. All these greatly impacting people all over the world. Additionally, people are focusing on the accumulation of greenhouse gases, basically carbon dioxide, fluorinated gases, methane, nitrous oxide, again, all from human activity. All this, again, creating a situation where heat is being controlled or being blanketed, um, part of that activity increasing the warming of the planet. So you have it not only in terms of industry, but also in terms of agriculture, where you see methane being released by cattle and other agricultural activities becoming part of the problem. So what can we face as part of the climate change? Well, we've been starting to see the result of that in terms of extreme weather events, in terms of storms, floods, droughts, heat waves are becoming more frequent and severe. 90% of natural disasters in Europe since 1980 have been caused uh, by the changes in the weather and the climate. The polar ice is melting and sea levels are rising at a great rate, greatly impacting coastal areas uh, and island areas all over the world. And so you see a lot of people being impacted by water shortages, fresh water shortages, issues around hunger and poverty as well, exacerbating the effects of climate change. Okay, the next slide will actually showcase and discuss some of the impacts climate change will be having on health.
Climate change is one of the most serious global health threats of the 21st century, yet very few Americans are aware of the consequences it has on the health of communities, families, and children right here in the United States. Heat waves send tens of thousands of people to emergency rooms. Rising temperatures worsen air pollution, increasing smog, wildfire smoke, and pollen. Drought threatens water and food security, floods force people from homes and cost billions, and worsen waterborne illnesses, even as climate change threatens to increase the spread of other infectious diseases like dengue fever and Lyme disease. Now, while we can't say that any one of those events is caused by climate change, what we do know from climate studies is to expect more of those kind of events occurring with more intensity and in many cases lasting longer. It's time to start connecting the dots between climate and your health.
The cost of health issues, premature death, and illness due to climate change has been increasing over time to the extent that currently from 2002 to 2009, the increase in premature death and illness resulting from factors related to climate change increased by $14 billion, and we'll likely see that increase over time. In regards to some of the factors they looked at ozone smoke pollution and that its impact, the heat wave, hurricanes, wildfires, mosquito-borne infectious disease, and river flooding. The Natural Resource Defense Council, a policy institute focused on climate change and environmental issues, have made 4 recommendations: that there needs to be better cost analysis of the effects of climate change, improved tracking of the impact of climate change, better emergency preparedness in communities, especially in dealing with issues around hurricanes, drought, heat waves, and so forth, and also importantly, reduce climate change pollution. And this is probably one of the bigger things and one of the major issues that people have experienced problems trying to address. One way to deal with climate change globally was the Kyoto Protocol. And this goal was to create legally binding targets for emissions, of focusing on 6 major greenhouse gases within industrialized countries, and also creating other mechanisms, basically a cap and trade ability so that people can buy and sell the ability to emit greenhouse gases. So perhaps one country is able to control their gases. They can sell their ability to emit greenhouse gases to other countries. And it also contain elements for sustainable development and to provide support to developing countries on adaptation towards limiting greenhouse gases and as part of their industrialization. However, the United States has not provided much support for the Kyoto Protocol. While it was signed by President Clinton in '97, it was never ratified by the Senate, and so it was never followed by the United States. President Bush refused to support it. He felt that it would hurt the U.S. economy. President Obama decided not to be involved with it because it was expiring in 2012, and you have many countries pretty much dropping out of the accord, and Canada dropped out in 2011, and so the Kyoto Protocol as a way to control greenhouse gases failed. There has been move to try to within the United States to deal with climate change, and in 2009 they attempted to pass the American Clean Energy and Security Act, which identified renewable energy standards, energy efficiency, tried to initiate cap and trade regimes. Again, some industries that are able to control their greenhouse gases can sell credits to other industry who probably would need to need to expel or need to emit more greenhouse gases, and again trying to provide the ability to transition to a clean energy economy. However, it failed. It was not passed by the House and Senate. Now, as of this recording, President Obama unveiled a major climate change initiative, and this is still pretty much being promoted uh, currently. So I don't have a lot of information right now, but this will definitely be discussed within class. But even with the failure of the Act in 2009, President Obama has initiated again some activity in trying to uh, control greenhouse gases emitted by power plants, specifically coal power plants, and that has already caused a lot of anger among states um, are, that produce coal for these power plants. And this will become a very important part of a discussion in class. Now, the reason why attempts to control climate change in the United States have pretty much failed are due to a number of reasons. Uh, One factor is the conflict among many different stakeholders, where you have environmentalists and business people. You have new industries, old industries. You know, those who are focused on oil, coal, and other carbon industries versus other industries, solar, wind, and so forth, all trying to compete in uh, economically, and with some seeing that any attempt to deal with climate change will see one industry being disrupted and other industries being benefited, and so people are trying to control the kind of legislation in order to maintain uh, their level of economic power. There's also an issue of time scale where you know a lot of people can't perceive changes that occur within a 30-year span of time, and so aren't really able or aren't willing to think about that kind of long-term kind of change or think about that kind of long-term activity. And then there goes the issue of denialism that many groups uh, attempt to deny the evidence of climate change and use it to try to promote their own agenda, promote their own positions. And so you have many people in a lot of the carbon industries and those in politicians who are benefited from those industries support or deny the current science around it. And all these all all become factors that have led to the failure of attempts to control climate change, and has led President Obama to again focus on his own initiative, which will be focused on more in more detail in class.